Again, thank you very much for this opportunity to share my views on this. I would like to start with emphasizing that actually when assessing cases involving claims to more environmentally safe production and distribution processes, authorities actually will face the standard trade-off between higher prices and efficiencies. And the two building blocks to assess these efficiencies are actually, one, verifying that the efficiency, the efficiency claims, and the second is determining how much, whether these efficiencies are valued by consumers and how much. So in the case of environmental benefits, the key question will be whether the harm caused by the higher prices as a result of reduced competition from an agreement or from a merger can be offset by non-price improvements that consumers value. And here the consumer's willingness to pay for these non-priced improvements is the way that it's typically, that these benefits are typically quantified. So up to now, this is all standard. So the key challenge is that arise when considering environmental benefits. There are two unique challenges. First, there has to be a way to find a reliable quantification of the benefits, one that takes into account the value that consumers perceive even when they do not consume a product. And second, determining who are the relevant sets of consumers that need to be considered. And we've been hearing a lot about this. This is how to take into account the out-of-market benefits. So let me start first with let me focus on the first challenge, which is there is a generalized concern that consumers are unwilling to pay for the extra cost of production and distribution processes that have fewer negative externalities. What we learned from environmental economics, though, is that this apparent unwillingness to pay for environmentally friendly products by consumers is in fact partly due to insufficient information on the environmental consequences of their behavior. So consumers don't have sufficient information. And second, on the side of the measurement of the willingness to pay, the issue is that there tends to be an exclusive focus on the consumption value of a good. And here is where the uniqueness of environmental products comes in. The environmental products have a unique feature, and that is that they can have a value independent of consumption. In other words, consumers can attach to an environmental product both a use and a non-use value of these goods. So what is a use value? The use value is what we're more familiar with. So the use value is the utility that consumers obtain when they consume or experience a good. So for example, if we're thinking of a forest, the use value of a forest is the value we attach to visiting this forest, right? So what is the non-use value? The non-use value is the value obtained or the utility obtained from there's been at least in the literature, in the environmental literature, three alternative sources for non-use value. First is the utility obtained from knowing that the forest will be preserved. And this is referred to the existence value. So I may not want to go to the forest, but I obtain utility from knowing that the forest exists. Second, there is value or utility from knowing that at any moment one can visit the forest. So this is the option value. So I currently don't visit the forest, but it gives me utility to know that tomorrow, if I want to, I can go and visit the forest and obtain a use value for the forest. And third, and I think possibly the most relevant in the context of this discussion, is what is called as the bequest value. So this is the utility from knowing that the future generations will be able to enjoy that product, that environmental product. So in the case of the forest, that future generations will be able to enjoy that forest. So before moving on to the methods that have proven reliable in measuring non-use value, let me highlight 4 very important features of non-use value that we need to keep in mind. So first, the non-use value, and here I'm reiterating, the non-use value is independent of the use value. So consumers can attach a value to a good even if they don't consume it, and they never will consume it. Second, consumers that place a high, even consumers that place a high value on environmental protection may only have a vague sense of the impact of their consumption decisions on the environment. And this misinformation can distort the estimates of non-use value. So individuals, it's very important that individuals be properly informed of the implications on the environment of the alternative choices they have available to be able to extract the correct, a reliable measure of willingness to pay. And third, non-use value can be quite large relative to use value. And this is illustrated, for example, by the Exxon Valdez damage claim, which was related to the oil spill off the shores of Alaska in the 90s. And here Exxon estimated a direct loss from the loss of recreational visitors of $4 million US. So this is the use value, just the loss from visitors. While the state of Alaska claimed damage for $3 billion US, and this was based on the passive use value. And they obtained this based on a survey method, which is really most of what that really pushed this methodology forward, and the concept of passive use and how to measure it. And I will touch on this in the next slides. And then finally, another very important feature of non-use value is that it's influenced also by the perception of the choices of others. So here is the issue of free riding. So what an individual is willing to pay will depend in part on what it considers or perceives that others are willing to pay. So willingness to pay, in my view, is the right approach to tackle environmental benefits. And there are methodologies that allow us to do it. And more importantly, these methodologies are the standard ones. These are the methodologies that are available to measure non-use benefits and environmental benefits, are those that authorities already use. And really only some adjustments are necessary in order to be sure to capture the total value of the environmental product. So on these slides is like the full spread of tools. So you have basically the revealed preference methods and the stated preference methods. So both can be used to evaluate the benefits from environmental products. The key difference, of course, is the source of the information that is used to estimate the willingness to pay. So revealed preference methods, they rely on historical data, which may have an advantage in terms of the time necessary for the analysis. However, it has 2 disadvantages. The main disadvantage of revealed preference methods, such as hedonic pricing, travel cost methods, averting behavior, is that they can only measure the willingness to pay for attributes that already exist. And this is really important because when we're now in a world where if we really want to progress in controlling climate change, there will be lots of innovation. There will be lots of new products and new introductions of things that we may not even imagine right now. And we need to be able, and so it's important to be able to capture those benefits. And that is something, or those attributes, or how much consumers are willing to pay for those attributes. And that is something that most revealed preference methods cannot capture. The 2 columns on the left showing the real preference methods that do not capture that cannot take a prospective analysis. They cannot capture future attributes. Whereas the third column, the field experiments, those can. And these have been used, and they're quite popular in the sense that a product is modified, one of its attributes is modified, and then actual purchasing decisions of consumers are observed. The problem that this method has, and is common to all revealed preference methods, is that they're not reliable when non-use value is important, because, as I mentioned before, non-use value is really to evaluate properly non-use value. Consumers really need to be provided additional information in addition to just observing the product and choosing between the product. So the preferred method when non-use values is an important aspect is to use stated preference methods. And why is that? First, as I just mentioned, consumers can be informed properly of the environmental implications of the alternatives available. Second, they can also be made aware of the implications of their choices, and the choices that they have to make have to be seen as consequential. Consequential on both fronts. Consequential on the front of the environment, so they have to be made aware that their choices they make will have an impact on the environment. And second, consequential in terms of their income. So they have to be given options to decide which they really care for and which really will affect their own income, so that we obtain a reliable response. And third, as I again mentioned before, was consumers also have to be informed on what others are doing. And this can be also done by scenarios. So all of this requires a survey. And the surveys need not be highly complex, so simple surveys can be used. And for example, online panels which are run routinely can be used. And this, for example, was what the ACM used in the Chicken for Tomorrow case. But in the case of more where non-use value can be particularly relevant, and where the attributes are not existing, and when the effect of the agreement or merger on prices might be higher, in all those cases, it is really the best to do an extended survey, which is not extreme, it doesn't mean it's more complicated. It just means that additional steps have to be taken. And the additional steps that have been proven through environmental economics that really help extract a reliable measure of the non-use value of products is first to conduct exit surveys, where the respondents are asked questions that allow the assessing how well they understood the scenarios that they were presenting, and whether any of the responses, whether these responses can be biased and in what direction. And very importantly, conducting pre-testing that will allow that the survey presents choices to the respondents that are consequential, and that the context in which these questions are posed is well understood. Which is the right choice? I think here, the answer will not be a surprise to anyone. It depends, and it really depends both on the expected impact on prices. So as I mentioned before, the larger the expected impact on prices, the more detailed and exhaustive analysis has to be done to extract a true willingness to pay that will capture both the use and non-use values. And similarly, the more innovative this attribute is, the less data already exists on current behavior, current attitudes relative to this attribute, then again, it is more important to conduct a more extensive survey. Also, these surveys will be extremely important in the current context, like where those we are living now, where attitudes, customer attitudes or consumer attitudes are changing rapidly. So we've already seen that that individuals are more and more concerned with the impacts on the environment, and the conduct of others and of firms will be more relevant to their decisions. So finally, one last word on who should be included in this survey. And this is the out-of-market benefits. So the existence of non-use value is that which makes it very important to determine very really consider very carefully which consumers are to be, the willingness to pay of whom is going to be considered when assessing the benefits. There are three different sources of out-of-market benefits. So first, if we focus only on current consumers, already taking into account the non-use value of the product is going to be able to capture part of those out-of-market benefits. Because, as I said before, part of the non-use value is the value that current consumers attribute to a product because of its future value. So in the case of the forest, the non-use value of that forest being there for future generations. Second, it's important to consider potential consumers. So potential consumers are those that today do not, given the current attributes and the current social attitudes, they would not consume a product. But once the new attribute becomes available, or the attitude towards environmental production changes, then they would consider becoming a consumer. And therefore, the willingness to pay of those potential consumers is very important. And here, these potential consumers will add a use value, and they will also add their non-use value. And then finally, the third source of out-of-market benefits is the non-use value of the, let me call them, permanent non-consumers. So that is individuals who would never have, never will, and are not interested at all in ever visiting a forest, can always value the forest for the preservation and the impact it has on the environment. And it is, I think, at least where to draw the line is not clear, but I think it's very important for this to be openly debated, because I think it's fairly uncontroversial to say that focusing only on current consumers is insufficient. And yet, maybe including all consumers may be too extreme in some cases. However, if non-consumers are actually willing to contribute to preserve an environmental good, say the forest, in the same way that in the case of Alaska, the North Americans from states others than Alaska were willing to contribute to avoid another oil spill off the shores of Alaska, there's no reason to ignore them. And in fact, these out-of-market benefits could indeed be used to compensate the harm to actual consumers. So I think this is an important debate that has to continue and be open in cases, and the nice or the benefit of using surveys is that in fact all consumers, all individuals, consumers and non-consumers can be surveyed. Their responses, their willingness to pay can be measured, and perhaps authorities can then in the second round determine how much to weigh the willingness to pay of those non-consumers. So to sum up, I think there is already a lot that can be done within the current standard and with the current methodologies to take into account environmental benefits in competitive assessment.